Popular Daily Wire host Matt Walsh is another foreign commentator who's been discussing Australia's decline into wokeism lately. He's delivered us a serve for going from a nation full of heroic Steve Irwins to what now appears to be a land of woke wimps.
And I'm sure there are great people in Australia. But my opinion of Australia, I'm just being honest with you, my opinion of Australians has just plummeted. Like before COVID, I thought that Australia was, first of all, an absolute hellscape where poisonous spiders rain from the sky. That part is true, but then I further thought that because of that, anyone who lives there, these have to be like the toughest sons of on the planet. I really thought, I thought it was just I thought it was a whole country of Steve Irwins. That's what I thought. And from COVID and now ending with this, I'm like, how is Australia the weakest, wokest, lamest country on earth? How is that possible?
Yes, how is that possible? How did we get here? Matt Walsh made his name on Daily Wire and for his exceptional documentary, What is a Woman? He has less experience of our country than Konstantin Kisen does, but I reckon he's not far off the mark there. His assessment is based on a comparison of the American version of a reality TV show called Alone and the Australian version of the same show. Matt says that the American version's been going for 10 years and involves a bunch of trained survivalists being thrown into the jungle and being required to survive alone with just a camera to film themselves on. Last one surviving wins. Matt stumbled on the new Aussie version of the show and he thought it'd be great.
First of all, surviving in Australia would be pretty tough, you'd think. Like Australia is a dangerous place. And I also thought Australians are a hardy people. You know, I bet they could survive for months without tapping out. Usually on the American version, you know, the winner survives 90 days, maybe at most, 100 days at most. I thought Australians, like they could, this show will go on for 6 years and they won't tap out. I mean, this will be really interesting.
But what Matt got was not what he bargained for. He says the show is good, but for the opposite reason he thought.
Which makes it unintentionally like the funniest show that I've ever seen. Because apparently the producers of the Australian version of Alone decided that making Alone Australia isn't really what they wanted to do. What they wanted to do is they wanted to make Alone DEI edition. That's what they decided. So they got 10 contestants, just like the American version. But they did not get like gritty, skilled survivalist types. They were more concerned with checking all the PC boxes. So they ended up with 2 lesbians, 2 people who claim to be indigenous, this like Gen Z environmentalist guy, and other people, like most of whom are totally unqualified for wilderness survival at all.
Oh, so it's diversity, equity, and inclusion alone. Woke alone. Well, how did that work out, I wonder?
One of the lesbians dropped out after one night, started crying and dropped out after one night. One of the indigenous guys, this is my favorite thing, like at least just watch the second episode of the show, it's hilarious. This indigenous guy, he spends the whole first day like going on and on about how he's indigenous and he's in touch with nature and, you know, he can do this because he's indigenous. Oh, by the way, did you know I'm indigenous? I'm indigenous. I'm so indigenous. I'm the most indigenous guy of all time. And then he starts crying and drops out after 24 hours because he was lonely. The Gen Z guy, I'm not making this up. I swear to you, I'm not making this up. The Gen Z guy, it's like 22 years old. He takes a COVID test out in the wilderness with a COVID test, and it comes back positive. And he immediately calls the med team to evacuate him and starts complaining that his heart is racing. And he's like, the med team comes in on their boat and they take him out and he's curled up in the boat, like shivering. And he just tested positive for COVID 3 minutes ago. This was all on the first day. They lost 3 people on the first day, all of them crying. Like, I could do better than this.
There are lots of other things in the show that we as modern Aussies have come to accept as normal in our culture now that foreigners still find somewhat amusing, providing us with a good and healthy reminder of how much we've changed and perhaps not for the better.
Meanwhile, again, I'm not making this up, each episode starts with a land acknowledgement. That's real. There are all kinds of these woke environmental restrictions, so they aren't allowed to hunt pretty much any game. They can't even use a fishing net because the endangered platypus might get caught in the net. So they can't eat. Like they're all there and they can't eat anything. And on the rare occasion that they do catch something to eat, like with a makeshift fishing line, most of them are vegetarians. So they get really emotional about the fact they have to eat. One woman, she caught an eel and she was really sad. She was like crying while she was beating the eel to death because she's a vegetarian. And then she ate it and was like trying to stifle her vomit while she's eating this poor creature. It's just, I'm telling you, it is, it's a bunch of woke, whiny liberals sitting around crying and starving.
Oh, God, that is gold. Matt Walsh from the Daily Wire, giving us an outsider's view of the way that our culture seems to have changed a little bit in recent times. Definitely some vegan food for thought.